The sea looks empty until it doesn't. A warship cuts through the dark, radar sweeping, crew confident, screens glowing like a control room in a sci-fi movie. Then the first warning comes in late. A tiny blip that could be clutter, could be a bird, could be nothing. Seconds later, the nothing multiplies. 10 dots become 50. 50 becomes a swarm, low, slow, cheap, and close enough that the horizon is no longer a line, it's a trap. The ship's sensors are doing what they were built to do, but the battle has moved faster than the ship can turn data into decisions. And in modern drone war, the first thing that dies is time. This is Battletech Declassified. Modern Warfare Explained. Here's the shift that changes everything. The ship cannot be the first shield anymore. If the ship is the first shield, it is also the first target, the first bottleneck, the first thing that gets saturated. So defense moves forward, not with bigger missiles, not with louder radars, with something simpler, a picket line. In the old days, navies used picket ships, smaller escorts spread out ahead of the main force to see danger first. Today, that picket line can fly. Picket drones push your eyes and ears outward, so the warship becomes the last shield, not the first, and the kill chain starts earlier, when you still have room to breathe, think, and act. Think of a soccer goalkeeper. If every attacker is already inside the penalty box, the keeper is doomed, no matter how skilled. The keeper needs defenders out front, forcing bad angles, slowing the play, buying time. Warships today are too often stuck playing goalkeeper with no defenders, staring at a swarm already at the door. Ship-based sensors suffer from a simple physics problem: the horizon. Low-flying drones hide in sea clutter, in weather, in the messy background of waves and reflections. Even if the radar is strong, the track quality can be weak until the target is close, and close is exactly where you don't want to start making decisions. Picket drones fix that by changing geometry, not just power. A drone can sit higher, farther forward, and at different angles than the ship, seeing the same threat from a cleaner perspective. It is like stepping onto a chair to see over a crowd. Suddenly, the swarm is not a surprise. It is a story unfolding early enough to interrupt. The promise of picket drones is not that they shoot everything down. The promise is earlier certainty. Earlier certainty means earlier choices. And earlier choices are what make cheap defense possible, because you can allocate the right interceptor, cue the right sensor, and avoid wasting premium missiles on decoys. Now connect that to your binge link. AI chooses faster, but your sensors are still on the ship. AI can be the fastest brain in the world, but if it only gets information at the same late moment the humans get it, it is like having a supercomputer inside a locked basement with no internet. The first goal of picket drones is to move the internet outside. They form a forward sensor net, a mesh that feeds the ship earlier tracks, earlier classifications, and earlier warnings. That turns AI from a late referee into an early coach, shaping the fight before it turns chaotic. This is why picket drones are more than extra drones. They are a new layer in the kill chain. Traditionally, the ship detects, the ship tracks, the ship decides, the ship shoots. That concentrates the whole chain in one box. In saturation, that box overloads. With picket drones, detection can happen forward, tracking can be refined by multiple viewpoints, and the ship receives a cleaner, more confident picture. That is the moment the ship stops being a single point of failure and starts acting like a fortress behind an advancing screen. Let's make it concrete. A swarm attack usually wins by forcing 3 failures at once. You detect too late, you can't tell real from fake, and you run out of time to sequence shots. Picket drones attack those failures directly. First, they extend the detection line so that late becomes early. Second, they add classification cues. A ship radar might see dots, but a forward drone can combine radar, electro-optic cameras, infrared, acoustic hints, and even passive sensing, like listening for emissions. It is the difference between seeing footprints and seeing the person making them. Third, they help sequencing. In a swarm, the ship system can get stuck in a traffic jam. Too many tracks, too many updates, too many priorities changing. A picket drone network can pre-sort targets, cluster them into groups, and label what matters most, like a smart bouncer at a club who spots the troublemakers before they reach the door. That does not remove the need for human command. It removes the noise that makes command impossible under stress. You might ask, why not just put better sensors on the ship? Because better is not always the right word. Sensors are like flashlights. A brighter flashlight helps, but it still points from the same location. If the wall blocks your view, a brighter light does not magically go through the wall. The horizon and clutter are that wall. Picket drones are like moving the flashlight to a different window, and if you have many drones, you can light the scene from many windows at once, creating a 3D picture instead of a flat guess. This is where the concept of multi-angle tracking becomes a force multiplier. One sensor sees a dot. 2 sensors see motion. 3 sensors start to infer intent. With multiple Picket drones, you can estimate altitude and heading more accurately. You can spot decoys that behave wrong, and you can predict which targets are likely to be the real shooters versus the cheap distractors. The ship becomes the central magazine and decision authority, but the eyes are forward, and the fight starts before the swarm reaches its optimal range. There is also a psychological reality to naval combat. When everything arrives at once, humans hesitate, not because they are weak, but because uncertainty is expensive. If you are not sure a dot is real, you delay, and delay kills. Picket drones reduce uncertainty earlier, which reduces hesitation later. That matters because many ships still operate with strict rules of engagement, confirmation steps, and safety checks, all reasonable in normal combat, all deadly in saturation. Picket drones can provide earlier confirmation that lets the ship authorize actions sooner without gambling blind. This is the quiet truth behind the ship becomes the last shield. The ship is not meant to panic fire at everything. The ship is meant to conserve its most valuable shots for the most valuable targets. That requires a forward layer that filters the chaos. Picket drones do not replace missiles, guns, lasers, or electronic warfare. They make those tools usable under pressure. Without Picket drones, you are fighting with your best tools, but with your worst information. So what does a Picket drone actually do in a real scenario? Picture a ring around the fleet, not a perfect circle, more like a shifting halo. Some drones sit high for wide area search. Some sit lower to look under weather and into clutter. Some are passive, listening. Some are active, pinging short bursts. They trade places because endurance matters. And they are expendable by design because a picket line is supposed to take the first hit. That sounds harsh, but it is the same logic as armor. The armor exists to be hit, so the heart survives. When the swarm appears, the pickets are the first to see it, and the first to be targeted. But that is exactly when they earn their keep. They feed tracks back to the ship. They mark likely threats, and they can even force the swarm to reveal itself by prompting it to maneuver or emit. Sometimes the best defense is not shooting first, it is forcing the attacker to show their hand. The pickets create that pressure forward, so the ship's own radar does not have to play hide-and-seek at point-blank range. Now we hit the key trade-off: communications. A picket network needs links, and links can be jammed. If you rely on one clean data pipe, you are building a new single point of failure. So the best picket drone concept is not one drone streams everything back. It is many drones share enough information to keep the picture alive. That means mesh networking, redundancy, and graceful degradation. If half the drones die or go silent, the other half still provides a usable warning. It is like having many witnesses instead of one camera. This is also why autonomy matters, but not the buzzword kind. The pickets must be able to do useful work even when the ship is busy or the link is degraded. They need local logic, simple behaviors like hold position, rejoin the ring, switch sensors, keep tracking this cluster, hand off to another drone, or break line of sight to survive. The ship remains the final authority, but the picket layer must be able to keep the defense forward without constant babysitting. Here is the uncomfortable part. The attacker will adapt. If you put picket drones forward, the attacker will try to blind them, jam them, spoof them, or overwhelm them. That is why picket drones have to be cheap enough to lose and smart enough to lose well. A picket drone that dies after sending 10 seconds of perfect early tracks can be worth more than $1 million interceptor fired too late. This flips the cost logic. You stop spending your money on late heroics and start spending it on early clarity. There is a second layer too: deception. Picket drones can become decoys on purpose. They can lure the swarm into revealing seekers, or force the attacker to waste time and energy. Think of it like throwing a fake pass in sports. The goal is not to score with the fake. The goal is to move the defense, create an opening, and then score with the real play. In naval terms, the opening is time, and time is what the swarm is trying to steal. So far, we have talked about seeing first, but Picket drones also change shooting, not because they carry big weapons, but because they can cue the right weapon at the right moment. The ship's interceptors and guns are strongest when they are not surprised. A good cue means your radar is already looking where it needs to look, your fire control is already stabilized, your system is already committed to a track that is likely real. That turns frantic reaction into planned execution, even under pressure. And this is the real promise of this episode. Defense shifts forward. The ship becomes the last shield, not the first. The ship is no longer the lonely goalkeeper. It is the fortress behind a living, moving, sacrificial screen that buys time, builds certainty, and keeps the kill chain synchronized. AI can choose faster, but only if the world reaches AI early enough to matter. Picket drones are how you move the world forward, so the decision point moves forward too. A Picket drone screen is not one gadget, it is geometry turned into a weapon. The simplest mental model is a tripwire, not a shield. A shield sits on your body and hopes it can absorb the hit. A tripwire sits out in front and warns you before the hit even begins. That early warning is what gives a warship its most valuable resource back: options. If the first detection happens at 10 nautical miles instead of 2, you do not just gain distance, you gain decision cycles. You gain the ability to turn, to change speed, to reposition the formation, to pre-arm your close-in weapons, to clear your firing arcs, to set jammers, to launch decoys, to bring your interceptors to the right posture. In a saturation fight, those small preparations are the difference between a calm sequence and a pile-up of last-second guesses. So the Picket screen has one job above all: buy time without becoming a new bottleneck. That means the Picket layer must be designed like a team sport, not like a single hero. One drone cannot see everything, cannot communicate forever, cannot survive being targeted. But a team can rotate. A team can pass the ball. A team can lose players and still play. The best Picket screen is a living formation, a forward ring that shifts with weather, threat direction, and mission, always trying to keep one clean look angle on the sea skimmers, one high look for higher flyers, and one passive listener that cannot be easily jammed because it is not shouting into the spectrum. Now, let's talk sensors, because Picket drone can mean very different things depending on what it carries. If your threat is cheap prop drones, cameras and infrared might be enough to confirm shape and behavior. If your threat is cruise missiles, you need speed and precision. You need a track that updates fast enough to cue a shot. If your threat includes jammers and decoys, you need passive sensing, because anything that only sees what it transmits can be fooled by someone who knows how to manipulate returns. The power move is mixing sensor types, so the enemy has to beat multiple senses at once, like trying to sneak past a guard dog, a security camera, and a motion sensor simultaneously. A practical Picket package often looks like this. One layer uses a small radar for detection and range. Another layer uses electro-optic and infrared for classification, because pixels can confirm what radar only suspects. A third layer listens for emissions. Sometimes it is the drone itself listening. Sometimes it is relaying what another platform hears. The point is not to stream a perfect video feed back to the ship. The point is to deliver confidence. This is real. This is decoy behavior. This cluster is accelerating. This one is likely the shooter. If AI chooses faster but your sensors are still on the ship, then Picket drones are how you move the senses forward so that the AI is not guessing in the dark. Here is a detail most people miss. In a fight, you do not need more data. You need better decisions. That means a Picket drone network should not flood the ship with raw feeds, because that can recreate the same overload you were trying to escape. Instead, it should act like a compression machine. It takes messy reality and turns it into clean signals, track IDs, confidence scores, predicted paths, and short alerts that are easy to act on. Think of it like a coach on the sideline. A coach does not read the entire playbook every second. A coach shouts one useful instruction at the exact moment it matters. This is where track quality becomes the center of the story. A track is not just a dot. A track is a belief, a probability that a target is real and where it will be next. The higher the track quality, the more confidently you can commit weapons without wasting shots. Picket drones improve track quality by giving multiple views and by holding continuity when the ship loses the target in clutter. If one drone sees a target dip into sea clutter, another drone at a different angle may still keep it. That continuity prevents the worst failure mode in swarm defense. The moment your system drops tracks, reacquires them late, then treats them as new threats, causing chaos in prioritization. But none of that matters if the network collapses under jamming. So the Picket layer must treat communication like a battlefield, not like a Wi-Fi problem. You assume the enemy is trying to break your links, confuse your timing, and spoof your messages. The answer is not one magic radio. It is redundancy and diversity. Multiple paths, multiple frequencies, shorter bursts, and the ability to keep operating when you are partially blind. The Pickets should be able to form a mesh where each node can relay, so losing one relay does not silence the whole line. It is like a rumor network. You can stop one person from talking, but you cannot stop everyone at once without spending massive effort. This is also why autonomy is not optional. It is insurance. If a drone loses contact, it should not become useless. It should keep doing the most valuable thing it can do locally: track, classify, survive, and hand off when possible. That might mean it switches to passive mode. It changes altitude, it repositions to regain link, or it flies a pre-planned orbit that maximizes line of sight. Autonomy here does not mean the drone decides to start a war. It means the drone refuses to become dead weight when the link is degraded. The ship can remain the decision authority, while the Picket layer remains resilient enough to keep the fight forward. Now comes the hardest part: trust. Warships are built around doctrine, procedures, and accountability. If a sensor on the ship says a target is hostile, there are established ways to act. But when a forward drone says it, commanders have to believe it enough to commit scarce interceptors, or to trigger jamming, or to launch decoys early. That is a cultural shift as much as a technical one. It is the same challenge as driving with a friend who gives directions. If you do not trust their sense of direction, you keep checking your own map, and you lose time. In swarm defense, losing time is losing the fight. So the integration has to make trust easy. The ship should not just receive alerts. It should receive a coherent picture: why the Picket believes what it believes, and how confident it is. That is where AI helps, not by replacing command, but by translating messy sensor evidence into understandable reasons. This object matches drone profile with high confidence. This cluster is behaving like decoys, constant speed, no evasive maneuvers. This track is accelerating into weapon release range. The goal is to reduce the mental load on the humans so they can focus on intent and consequences, not on arguing with the screen. Once the ship trusts the forward picture, everything downstream becomes sharper. The ship can pre-cue fire control, pre-align sensors, and pre-stage weapons. That changes the intercept economy. Instead of firing expensive shots late, you can fire cheaper shots early. You can decide which targets deserve a missile, which deserve a gun burst, which can be blinded by jamming, which can be lured by decoys, and which can be ignored because they are designed to waste your attention. This is exactly the shift your promise points to. The ship becomes the last shield. The ship keeps its premium capability for the moment it is truly needed, because the forward layer has already filtered the chaos. And here the whole Season 3 universe clicks together. Picket drones make future weapons matter more, not less. Lasers become more effective when they are not surprised. Microwave pulses become more valuable when you know which cluster is about to breach your inner ring. Cheap interceptors win the cost war when the target list is clean and prioritized. AI targeting beats human reaction time when the sensor picture arrives early enough to act, not just early enough to panic. Picket drones are the bridge between sensing and shooting, between the messy ocean and the ship's last line of defense. The first practical question is simple. Where do Picket drones come from when you need them now? If you wait until the swarm is already visible from the ship, you are too late, because the whole point is to move sensing forward before the attacker reaches the horizon trap. So Pickets have to be airborne early, like a perimeter alarm that is already armed before anyone touches the door. That means warships treat Picket drones like they treat radar watch, a continuous posture, not a launch when threatened button. Some drones orbit forward sectors based on threat direction. Others sit in reserve, ready to sprint to gaps when one drone runs low on fuel, gets jammed, or is shot down. The forward screen becomes a routine, like breathing, because in a drone age, surprise is the default setting of the ocean. Launching and sustaining that screen is a logistics story as much as a technology story. Drones need deck space, maintenance cycles, spare parts, charging, and recovery plans. That pushes doctrine toward modularity, quick swaps, and simple airframes you can lose without crying over cost. The ship doesn't need a hangar full of perfect drones. It needs a pipeline of good enough drones that keep the perimeter alive. This is the same logic as cheap interceptors. You win by keeping the system running under stress, not by owning one exquisite tool. A Picket drone that is 80% capable but always available is better than a 99% capable drone that is always grounded. Now zoom out to formation, because a Picket screen changes how a fleet moves. Traditional fleet defense often assumes the ship's sensors are the center, and everything orbits that center. With Picket drones, the sensor center shifts outward. You get something like a moving fence line in front of the ship, a set of forward posts that can look down the threat axis. Instead of one radar staring into clutter, you have multiple watchers at different altitudes and angles. In calm seas, your lower drones can skim and look under weather layers. In rough seas, you bias toward higher drones that see above clutter. In high jamming environments, you keep passive listeners on the edges because they cannot be blinded the same way active sensors can be. The best mental image is a medieval castle that doesn't rely on one wall. It uses outer fields, watchtowers, patrols, and traps, so invaders get detected early and slowed before they touch the gate. Picket drones are the watchtowers and patrols. They don't stop the enemy alone. They shape the timeline of the fight. The ship becomes the gate, heavily armed, but no longer surprised. That is why your promise matters. The ship is the last shield. The ship can hold its fire until the attacker has already been labeled, sorted, and forced into predictable paths by the forward layer. Once you have early detection, the next battlefield is allocation. Swarm attacks win when they force you to allocate late, because late allocation creates waste. You fire the wrong interceptor at the wrong target, or you fire too many at one, or you delay because you cannot decide. Picket drones can reduce allocation chaos by pre-building a target map the ship can trust. They can cluster tracks, highlight the fastest movers, identify likely decoys, and mark which targets are approaching from angles that will compress reaction time. This is not about AI magic. It is about making the target list readable, like turning a noisy crowd into a line with numbers. When the ship receives that cleaned picture, it can synchronize the rest of the kill chain. Fire control can pre-queue. Jammers can be aimed where they matter. Decoys can be deployed with intent, not desperation. Guns can be warmed and pointed. Interceptors can be chosen by tier. Cheap shots for cheap threats. Premium shots only when needed. And if you connect this to your binge link, AI chooses faster, but your sensors are still on the ship. You can see the fix clearly. AI speed only matters when the sensor picture arrives early enough to convert speed into good allocation. Otherwise, AI is just panicking faster than a human. Of course, the attacker will try to break the Picket layer first. The simplest counter is to target the drones themselves, because drones are softer than ships. The more advanced counter is to poison the picture, feed the Pickets false signals so they report the wrong story back to the ship. A swarm might send cheap decoys to bait the Pickets, while the real shooters slip low under clutter. Or the attacker might jam the link so that early tracks arrive late, destroying the whole value of forward sensing. And there is an even nastier idea: force the Pickets to chase, so the Picket line stretches and opens gaps, like distracting a guard dog away from the gate. This is why Picket drones must fight defensively too, not only by seeing, but by surviving and refusing to be pulled out of position. Pickets should be trained to prioritize coverage over pursuit. The point is not to hunt the swarm, it is to keep the warning line intact. If the attacker wants you to chase a decoy, that is exactly what you should not do. Instead, the Picket behavior should look boring. Hold the line, keep angle, keep altitude, keep track continuity, and hand off chase tasks to another layer if needed. The Picket screen protects the ship first by staying disciplined. Because losing discipline is how swarms turn your own sensors into bait. Now we touch the sensitive part. What happens when picket drones are given autonomy? Autonomy here is not a political word, it is a survival behavior. A drone that needs constant instructions will collapse under jamming and overload, so pickets need local rules, simple decision logic that keeps the network stable. Hold station. Adjust altitude for clutter. Switch sensors when jammed. Maintain track on the highest confidence threats. Relay only compressed updates. Hand off tracks to a neighbor before fuel runs out. Return to ship or a rendezvous point when damaged. These are not free will decisions. They are like reflexes in a body, the things you do without thinking so your brain can focus on strategy. But autonomy creates risk, especially fratricide and confusion. If multiple drones are observing the same cluster, you need shared labels and shared time. Otherwise, the ship receives contradictory reports, and contradiction kills trust. The solution is disciplined data formats, confidence scoring, and consensus behaviors. If one drone says hostile at 60% and another says unknown at 40%, the ship sees the conflict and can choose to escalate sensing, not panic fire. The goal is not certainty. The goal is controlled uncertainty. Uncertainty that is visible, quantified, and managed so the commander still feels in control. Rules of engagement matter even more when you move sensing forward. Many navies are comfortable firing based on ship sensors because those sensors are audited, tested, and integrated into known procedures. A forward drone introduces a new witness, and witnesses can be wrong. So the doctrine shift is not trust drones blindly. It is use drones to create earlier confidence thresholds. Think of it like court evidence. One shaky witness is weak. Two independent witnesses are stronger. A witness plus video is stronger. Picket drones add independent witnesses, and that makes earlier action justifiable because you are not guessing based on one noisy radar return at the horizon. This is where the human stays in the loop in a meaningful way. The human is not there to count every drone dot manually. The human is there to set policy and intent. What gets prioritized? What gets ignored? What triggers escalation? What level of confidence allows a shot? And how much risk is acceptable near neutral traffic or friendly aircraft? Picket drones protect warships first by buying time for those human decisions to remain real decisions, not desperate reactions. In other words, they don't remove judgment, they preserve it under pressure. Let's run a scenario that shows why this matters. A destroyer is transiting near a contested coastline. The sea is busy, fishing boats, wave clutter, occasional false contacts. Without pickets, the ship's radar sees the first low flyers only when they crest the practical detection line, and the track quality climbs too late. The swarm arrives like a magic trick. Now you see it. Now you're already in the closing seconds. But with picket drones, the story changes earlier. A forward high drone spots a faint cluster in the distance, not enough to shoot, but enough to watch. A second drone shifts lower and confirms motion inconsistent with birds or sea spray. A passive listener notes unusual emissions, and suddenly, the picture is not a single dot, it is a pattern. This is the moment the ship wins, before it fires a shot. The commander doesn't have to believe in miracles. The commander has a forward net feeding a consistent narrative. Direction, speed, probable types, and likely intent. The ship can turn to optimize arcs, pre-stage its cheapest interceptors, pre-aim jammers, and set decoys while the attacker still thinks it is hidden. The swarm has not even entered its best range, and already the defense has shaped the timeline. That is what the ship becomes the last shield really means. The ship is still the fortress, but the fight begins out front, where time belongs to you, not to the swarm. Here is the twist that makes picket drones feel almost unfair. They do not just give you earlier warning, they give you earlier leverage. When you see a swarm early, you can start shaping it before it reaches the ship's hardest problem zone. You can push electronic warfare outward, not as a desperate bubble around the hull, but as a forward haze that forces the attacker to fly blind sooner. You can deploy decoys earlier so the swarm's seekers lock onto ghosts while they are still far away. You can even change the geometry of the fight by turning the ship slightly, so your strongest defenses face the highest density axis, while your weak arcs are no longer staring straight into the threat. It is like noticing a storm on the horizon and closing all the windows before the first raindrop hits your floor. The attacker will try to break that advantage by collapsing your options back into panic time. They will throw noise at your pickets, send fake swarms to force early spending, or attempt to jam the link so your early picture arrives late. So your doctrine has to be disciplined. You do not respond to every early contact with a missile. You respond with posture. You escalate sensing. You cue your systems. You move the ship. You prep cheap defenses. You hold premium shots for premium certainty. Picket drones protect warships first because they let you move through levels of response without guessing, and they force the attacker to earn every second of surprise instead of being gifted it for free. Now the episode's core promise becomes concrete. Defense shifts forward. That means your outer ring is not built from expensive missiles. It is built from cheap information and cheap pressure. Picket drones create the outer ring by detecting, classifying, and queuing. And then your mid-ring can be cheap interceptors, electronic warfare, and even directed energy when conditions allow. Your inner ring, the ship itself, stays reserved for the hardest moments, the leakers, the true shooters, the targets that slip through because weather, clutter, and deception are never fully solved. If you think of defense like a castle, the outer ring is your scouts, the mid-ring is your archers, the inner ring is your gate. And the ship's survival depends on not forcing the gate to fight the entire army alone. This is also the moment you can finally make AI chooses faster mean something. AI is not valuable because it is spooky or futuristic. AI is valuable because it can keep the defense synchronized when everything accelerates. But synchronization needs early signals. Picket drones give the AI a forward feed, not a late camera replay. With that, AI can do what humans cannot. Maintain dozens or hundreds of tracks, update priorities every second, and still preserve a stable plan instead of thrashing. The ship becomes the last shield because it stops doing everything itself. It becomes the final authority and magazine behind a forward layer that keeps the kill chain aligned. Let's be honest about failure modes, because the ocean is a liar. Picket drones can fail in boring ways. Batteries die, weather knocks them down, salt air eats electronics. Recovery fails at night. The deck is busy. The crew is tired. They can also fail in scary ways. Jammed links, spoofed tracks, hacked behaviors, false confidence that makes you commit too early. The worst failure is not a drone gets shot down. The worst failure is a picket layer that convinces you the picture is clean when it is actually poisoned. Because that erodes trust and makes commanders snap back to ship-only sensing, which puts you right back into the horizon trap. Trust is slow to build and fast to burn. So the doctrine has to include skepticism without paralysis. You don't treat Picket data as holy. You treat it as a weighted witness that becomes stronger when multiple sources agree. You design the system to reveal uncertainty, not hide it. If the Pickets disagree, the ship should see the disagreement and escalate sensing rather than firing blind. If the link degrades, the Pickets should switch to behaviors that still create value. Hold station. Maintain track continuity locally, and push short compressed bursts whenever possible. This is how you keep the forward layer from becoming a fragile trick. It becomes a resilient habit, and habits survive chaos better than cleverness. Now we build into the climax scenario, the moment Picket drones either prove their worth or die as a concept. The attack begins with confusion, a few contacts that look like fishing traffic, then a sudden bloom of low flyers that appear almost simultaneously across multiple bearings. The attacker is trying to stretch your attention, to force you to defend everywhere, which usually means you defend nowhere well. Without pickets, the ship would only see the swarm clearly when it is already close, and at that point, every decision is a late decision. But with pickets, the ship already has a forward halo, and that halo starts shouting something the ship can act on. Not, there are dots, but there are clusters. These clusters have leaders. These leaders are accelerating. These are likely shooters. These are likely decoys. The commander makes the crucial move early, not firing everything, but shaping the timeline. The ship turns to present its strongest arcs into the densest axis. The mid-ring activates. Jammers push outward. Decoys go out early to pull seekers away while the swarm still has distance to drift. Cheap interceptors are queued for the most dangerous lanes, not wasted on every speck. The close-in defenses are warmed and aligned before the swarm breaches inner range. The pickets start dropping. Some get jammed, some are destroyed, but they die after doing their job. They bought clarity and seconds. When the first leakers arrive, they arrive into a ship that is prepared, not surprised. That is the difference between an inner ring that collapses and an inner ring that holds. Notice what did not happen in that climax. The ship did not win because it suddenly had infinite ammunition. It won because it avoided the human trap, the trap where you wait for certainty until certainty arrives too late. Picket drones turn the fight into a layered conversation. First you see, then you shape, then you shoot. When you reverse that order, when you shoot because you are scared and hope the picture becomes clear later, you burn your magazine and still lose. The ship becomes the last shield because the first shield is now the forward net, the picket halo that absorbs the first wave of uncertainty, not the hull itself. This is the doctrine shift that people resist because it feels backwards. We are used to thinking the ship is the brain and everything else is an accessory. In the drone age, the ship is the magazine and authority, and the brain is distributed. Your eyes live forward. Your certainty lives forward. Your time lives forward. The ship is still the center of gravity, but it is no longer the only place where reality is perceived. That is why Picket drones protect warships first. They protect the one thing the ship cannot replace fast: its decision window. Once that window collapses, even perfect weapons become too slow. So what does this mean for the future fleet? It means survivability becomes less about stealth paint and more about spacing, layering, and cheap, persistent sensing. It means a warship without a picket screen is like a knight with no helmet, brave, expensive, and one surprise away from disaster. It means future weapons are not standalone miracles. They are instruments that need a clean orchestra to sound right. Lasers need stable cues. Microwaves need cluster awareness. Cheap interceptors need smart allocation. Even classic missiles perform better when they are launched into a story that started earlier, not into a panic that started late. And it means the hardest bottleneck shifts from the physics of detection to the architecture of trust. Can your fleet trust a distributed picture enough to act early without losing control? Can it resist the attacker's attempt to poison confidence? Can it keep the forward layer alive through logistics, weather, jamming, and attrition? If the answer is yes, the ship becomes the last shield as promised, and the swarm loses its favorite trick, surprise at the horizon. If the answer is no, you will keep fighting with your best weapons at the worst possible moment, when time is already gone and the ocean has already closed the distance for the attacker. Here's the clean takeaway. In modern swarm warfare, the decisive battlefield is not the last mile, it's the first minute. If you start the fight when the drones are already close enough to force reaction, you are playing defense on the attacker's schedule. Picket drones steal the schedule back. They move sensing forward, they move certainty forward, and they move your first real decision forward, so your ship is not forced to be the first shield. The ship becomes the last shield, the hardened inner ring behind a living forward screen that buys time and builds a picture you can act on. That is the real protection, not a magical force field, but the ability to make calm, layered choices before panic becomes your only option. And this is where the binge link lands, like a warning label. AI chooses faster, but your sensors are still on the ship. If you keep your eyes trapped on the hull, AI will only help you react faster to a problem you allowed to arrive too late. Picket drones are how you move the eyes outward, so AI speed becomes useful, not just louder. In the next episode, we push this logic even further, because once defense moves forward, you have to ask a brutal question. What happens when the forward layer is not just sensing, but also deciding, and your last shield is no longer a ship, but a network?